Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. If you do not think critically, you do not think at all, because true thinking requires more than simply accepting information at face value. Critical thinking involves questioning assumptions, evaluating evidence, and considering multiple perspectives. Without these elements, thought becomes little more than passive reception. In today's world, where misinformation spreads rapidly, and surface level opinions dominate public discourse. The ability to think critically is essential for making informed decisions and forming reasoned judgments. Without it, people are easily manipulated, misled, or stuck in narrow worldviews that hinder personal and societal growth. Therefore, thinking that lacks a critical edge is incomplete and ultimately ineffective. It is thinking in form, but not in function. Here, I want to discuss the critical paradigm and its role in research. The critical paradigm is deeply rooted in an intellectual tradition that prioritizes questioning assumptions, uncovering power structures, and fostering a reflexive approach to knowledge construction. This paradigm draws inspiration from some of the most influential thinkers in philosophy and science: René Descartes, Immanuel Kant, Karl Popper, Michel Foucault, and Jürgen Habermas. Their ideas provide the foundation for how the critical paradigm challenges conventional research methodologies, scrutinizes dominant discourses, and engages with the socio-political dimensions of knowledge production. Starting with René Descartes, often referred to as the father of modern rationalism, we see the significance of methodological skepticism, deliberately questioning established knowledge. Descartes insisted that true progress in knowledge requires doubting everything until only absolute certainty remains. In applied linguistics, this principle means rejecting unquestioned assumptions about language acquisition, pedagogical methods, and linguistic structures. In critical paradigm approach asks, what biases shape these theories? What societal factors sustain their dominance? The interrogation helps ensure that applied linguistic research remains open to alternative perspectives rather than reinforcing outdated paradigms. Building on this skepticism, Karl Popper introduced the notion of falsifiability, the idea that scientific theories must be testable and refutable. In the critical paradigm, this principle translates into actively seeking contradictions within dominant linguistic models, rather than accepting them as universal truth. Some theories in language learning gain prominence due to institutional influence, rather than empirical validation. The critical paradigm demands that these theories undergo rigorous scrutiny, making space for research that exposes their limitations rather than merely reinforcing them. However, research does not exist in isolation. It is shaped by power dynamics. This is where Michel Foucault's analysis of discourse and power becomes crucial. Foucault's work shows that what counts as valid knowledge is often dictated by dominant institutions. In applied linguistics, this means that certain theories, methodologies, or even languages themselves may be privileged over others due to political, ideological, or economic forces rather than scientific merit. The critical paradigm seeks to construct these hierarchies, questioning why certain linguistic models are upheld as a standard while others are marginalized. For instance, English language dominance in global education is often framed as a neutral or beneficial trend, yet Foucault's ideas encourage us to ask, whose interests does this serve? What perspectives are being silenced? By critically analyzing the institutional forces shaping applied linguistics, researchers within the critical paradigm strive to amplify suppressed voices and challenge linguistic imperialism. Moving forward, Jürgen Habermas provides an essential framework through his concept of communicative rationality. He argues that genuine understanding is achieved through open and transparent dialogue, not imposed doctrines. Applied linguistics research must prioritize ethical engagement and reflexivity, ensuring that discussions on language policy, pedagogical approaches, and linguistic identity foster inclusivity and participation rather than hierarchical control. The critical paradigm embraces this perspective, advocating for linguistic research that empowers communities rather than imposing rigid academic structures. At the heart of the critical paradigm lies Immanuel Kant's rallying cry, sapere aude, dare to know. Kant's philosophy urges his scholars to think independently, escaping intellectual immaturity by questioning established norms rather than accepting them blindly. This aligns perfectly with the critical paradigm's commitment to intellectual autonomy. A great example of this principle in action is the International English Language Testing System, IELTS, a standardized proficiency test widely used for academic and immigration purposes. While IELTS is recognized globally, scholars within the critical paradigm argue that its design and scoring mechanisms should be critically examined rather than accepted as inherently valid. For instance, research has highlighted concerns about the cultural biases embedded in IELTS test materials. Some studies suggest that the listening and reading sections may favor test takers from Western educational backgrounds, potentially disadvantaging candidates from other linguistic traditions. This raises important questions. Does IELTS truly measure English proficiency, or does it also reflect familiarity with Western discourse structures? Additionally, scholars have critiqued the high-stakes nature of IELTS, arguing that it functions as a gatekeeping tool that disproportionately impacts non-native English speakers seeking academic or professional opportunities. If applied linguistics research influences global language policies, then standardized tests like IELTS must be subjected to rigorous scrutiny to ensure they are fair, equitable, and methodologically sound. This aligns perfectly with Kant's challenge, sapere aude, dare to know. Instead of passively accepting IELTS as a gold standard, researchers must interrogate his assumptions, validity, and impact across diverse cultural contexts. By doing so, applied linguistics scholars uphold their ethical responsibility to critically examine prevailing methodologies, rather than simply endorsing them. Simply accepting research without questioning its scope contradicts the very essence of sapere aude. The critical paradigm insists on uncovering underlying assumptions and biases, rather than passively endorsing dominant narratives. To sum up, the critical paradigm requires scholars to be both reflective and reflexive. Reflective in questioning the validity of research frameworks, and reflexive in acknowledging how personal biases and systemic structures shape knowledge production. It calls for an intellectual stance that embraces Descartes' radical doubt, Kant's critical reason, Popper's falsifiability, Foucault's critique of power, and Habermas's commitment to open dialogue. By integrating these philosophical foundations, the critical paradigm does not merely seek to analyze language. It challenges its role in society, ensuring that applied linguistics evolves ethically, skeptically, and with intellectual independence. Thank you very much for listening.